Wassail, my friends, and welcome to the Infinite Screen, the podcast which attempts to cut through the chaos of content and aspires to answer the question that in a world where we could watch almost anything, what should we watch? My name is Phil Kingsland John. I'm a filmmaker, a theatre maker, and I teach young people how to make films. With me, as always, is
Matthew Hook. I'm a TV and movie obsessive and an advisor to different organizations all around the world about how they can tell better stories.
nice to see you, Matthew. How are you doing?
Yeah, great, man. Really good. I'm super psyched about this conversation.
So, this episode is another of our top 10 episodes, inspired by the incredible success of the new Spider-Man movie, which seems to have, if soared past 2 billion, it will do very soon. So, yeah, at a time when everybody thought superheroes was dead, Spider-Man comes out and just does incredible gangbusters at the box office. And yes, we've been thinking about perhaps the less known superheroes, or perhaps even the origins of superheroes. So, very quickly, how have you interpreted this topic, Matthew? You, in fact, named it the Unsung Superheroes.
Yes, so after a lot of deliberation and a lot of consideration, what I really decided to explore was, I guess, the routes that superhero movies haven't taken. Like we've ended up in a space. Obviously, hero stories are immemorial and will be with us forever as long as there are still humans on the earth. And then there was a period where that got translated into, I guess, sensationalist, exciting pulp fiction, but that still could have gone in lots and lots of different directions. And then we went through this kind of weird narrowing phase via, I guess you get the first phase, Superman, Batman, all that kind of stuff. But really, the vision of superheroes that we live with is like the 60s version of superheroes, which are, within a very narrow space, really. They're all within a contemporary landscape. They're all about understanding and seeing inside the hero and their psychological foibles. So what I've done is I'm feeling around the roots a little bit and going, what are some of the paths that superhero movies could have taken, but mainly didn't quite? So I'm looking for those outliers that go, well, we could have had lots more movies like that, or we could have a world in which there are movies like this. So that is my thesis for today, Phil. Every choice I make, I'm going to explain why I've picked it through that lens.
Is that just because of like this incredible explosion of Marvel films, which are all based off of characters that were introduced in the 60s? And when perhaps Marvel was very much a kind of a conveyor belt of new characters. And yes, they all followed a very similar formula, which was kind of iconoclastic at the time in terms of it's about the idea of making superheroes with flaws, so, or not necessarily with flaws, but that are very human, feel very human. So the Fantastic Four, it's all about their family aesthetics. Spider-Man, it's all about the fact that he can't pay the rent or he's got girlfriend issues. And then you've got Tony Stark, who's kind of an alcoholic. So is it just kind of a tangle of that with this then incredible success of the MCU means that has crystallized our view of what superheroes are?
Yeah, I think that's right. And obviously the truth is when people hit an entertainment template, they like to repeat it and find it because there's so much commercial risk in movie-based storytelling that even as adventurous and creative as you want to be, you're always trying to find something is going to hit with people. And there's clearly something in that formula that hits with people. Yes, the known characters, but I think also just kind of the aesthetic and tone of it. And I think what this aesthetic and this world of storytelling enables you to do is to childishly enjoy something which is escapist and wonderful, whilst also kind of being self-referential around it and kind of
Yes.
undermining it. So that 60s formula of going, we're both going to have really fun adventures and kind of be a little bit knowing and a bit winky and a bit psychological about it at the same time. That's such a great formula for attracting a bigger audience than you've had before. And I feel like that's such a natural furrow for studios to follow.
We've already been talking a lot about Marvel and DC. From the bat, we said, didn't we, that we weren't allowed to choose any Marvel or DC characters, that we were going to avoid that.
I've cheated.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
have
fair enough.
slipped one in, but I haven't I've slipped one in, which I think is just an example of a bit of Marvel storytelling, which I think is interesting and different. So don't
Yeah,
worry,
that's cool. I was
it's not
tempted
Spider-Man
to.
Brand New Day. It's something a bit unusual.
I was tempted to bring a couple in as well, but in the end, I restrained myself. But yeah, I was thinking about perhaps more what are the kind of the archetypal ideas that kind of tangle in the shape of the superhero, and where might they have come from? What are their antecedents? And also just trying to choose some films that I can actually don't mind promoting or recommending to people and that I can actually, enjoy watching. Because I did go down a real rabbit hole at one point of watching lots of silent serial films and just thinking I couldn't in good conscience recommend this to anybody. It's like important cinema, but really a hard watch these days.
At one
Yeah.
point, I had a list of 5 movies that I actually don't like. And I just had to have a word with myself and start again.
Super quickly, then, the criteria that I have centered on are
Okay.
number one, I've tried to choose characters that are protectors of a community beyond themselves. Like, it's not just a plain revenge story. Often, the cinema will try and big up the revenge element because it's something, perhaps a language that it knows better, and it has to be an origin story which has to have a revenge element. So often these things are kind of front and center. But I think crucial to a superhero is they are protector of a community beyond themselves. They're not entirely revenge fueled.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
Secondly, I've gone for employers of secret modes, often with an alter ego or like a persona that they use. Thirdly, of course, special abilities, skills, or resources, not necessarily like, magic powers, but perhaps kind of at the limit of what could be humanly possible. And then finally, important to me really is this link to the episodic pulp slash comic tradition. I think these characters have to have multiple adventures. They can't be one and done entities. So some kind of, and perhaps as I bring up my choices, I'll get into that a little bit more. But okay, those are my criteria.
I think the episodic thing is interesting because obviously in the world of movies specifically, that can be quite difficult because sometimes you only
Yes,
get one crack at it. So you might have
absolutely.
intended something to be episodic, but
Yeah, and that
if
I
you didn't
think
make
that
a
is.
profit, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's an area I think where this kind of clashes with the cinematic mode
yeah,
because
yeah,
like
yeah,
the comic book, yes, it is like a churn them out month after
yeah,
month. The TV series kind of leans into it, multiple adventures. But yes, when the superhero is then in a cinematic format, how do you
yeah.
reconcile those two?
In a way,
Is
it's a mismatch, isn't it? It's
yeah.
a, it's a mismatch, and this is why the Marvel thing. I'm sure we'll do a bit of Marvel bashing accidentally or intentionally during this episode, but it is a miracle. Like
Yeah.
how on earth they are able to live up to that kind of episodic universe kind of thing. I remember someone telling me in about 2004 that this is going to happen, and I thought they were insane. I'd say generally there is a misalignment really between how modern cinema works and how superheroes are supposed to work.
I guess another kind of illusion that has often been made is this kind of connection between superheroes and like myths and legends, and that they are kind of the equivalent of our version of Hercules or, Achilles or, the Greek heroes. I think that again, the kind of the difference with that is this like protector of a community thing. I think a lot of those kind of Greek heroes are just generally out for themselves or they're on a mission of glory.
I think that's true, but I think that also relates a little bit to the roots of this whole world of superheroes are actually quite narrow, and a part of it really is like the early 20th century and what the early 20th century was like and the feeling of societies being crushed under the weight of fascism. So it's kind of it made sense to locate things very much in that world. And lots of the guys that created those stories, obviously, particularly in the world of superheroes, are, early 20s immigrants, many of them Jewish, in the minor cities of the US, kind of railing against their own insignificance or the prejudice that they experienced, railing against fascism. So it's like it's the perfect hero for that moment and that world, which has then exploded out into all kinds of different directions.
Well, without further ado, then, Matthew, please will you unveil your first choice?
The first, I guess, convention that I want to go after is there is an assumption in all of these superhero movies in the broad Marvel DC universe that basically what we're looking at is something kind of contemporary. And they do a bit of sleight of hand, don't they? Because it's, you know, it's our world, but there's more technology. So it's kind of, maybe it's near future, a convenient near future where everything is basically the same as it is now, but there are a few bells and whistles that you get to play with. But what I found really interesting is when you go back to the roots of superheroes and actually the ideas that inspired the people that were writing the first superhero stories, often it was actually historical. It was a bit more like the heroic legend of going, what happened if this happened a little while ago? So I weighed up a couple of things here. I was looking at The Scarlet Pimpernel, which is one of my favorite stories when I was a kid, which is the French Revolution. It's a kind of like Bruce Wayne in the French Revolution, really. It's like a foppish aristocrat who turns out to be a very daring rescuer of French aristocrats from prisons. That didn't work quite so well because there isn't a great screen version of it. So I went straight for Zorro. And so my first choice is going to be The Mask of Zorro. Zorro is Don Vega, who appears to be a kind of indulgent, effete aristocrat. But when he puts on a mask and picks up a sword, he becomes Zorro. And he fits your criteria perfectly, Phil, because he is the masked defender of people oppressed by the authorities of Southern California. So it's kind of linked in with the whole American frontier mythologized story. But Zorro, I mean, Zorro is such a direct link to Batman. Really, it's like, I want Zorro to be in contemporary New York, and therefore he becomes Batman. He's got a mask, he's got a secret identity. He doesn't have superpowers, but we work on the assumption that he's always going to be better at sword fighting than anyone else. And he's brilliant at constructed clever plans and clever wheezes. He protects a community. So I think Zorro, in everything apart from the aesthetics and the assumptions about a superhero movie, is a superhero. And he's so clearly inspired all the people that wrote these first superhero stories.
Yes, I entirely agree, and I
Yeah.
think he is kind of superhuman, isn't he? His sword play is like beyond what a mortal man should be capable of. And of
Yeah,
course, just to
absolutely.
mention quickly for those comic book geeks out there who might be screaming at Matthew, that yes, in many versions of the Batman origin story, his parents have taken him to watch Zorro at the cinema when they are then murdered.
I did not know that. That's very cool. Good to know. But I mean, it's so obvious an inspiration, isn't it,
Yes.
for the creators of Batman. The movie I picked, this is tricky because there are, I think, two great Zorro movies, great in different ways. There is The Mark of Zorro, which is like the classic great movie. It has unbelievable sword play, but it is quite old. I decided to take the slightly more crowd pleasing The Mask of Zorro, which is a movie really just precedes this whole world of superheroes. I think it's 1998, so it's just before Sam Raimi's Spider-Man in the chronology. But this is the one where Zorro, the original Zorro, is Anthony Hopkins, slightly unconvincing Spanish lineage, Anthony Hopkins, but in all other respects, he's really, really cool. But he is the aging mentor passing on the mantle to the next generation. And he meets the perfectly cast at the perfect time Antonio Banderas, who is a brilliant fighter and a kind of vengeful against his background, the terrible things that have happened to him. But original Zorro helps train new Zorro to kind of elevate his ideas of fighting against oppression, to train himself to be not just a brawler and a fighter, but an artist of the sword. And then he goes and takes down the terrible oligarch in the local area. It is a great film. I'd forgotten how good it was. I went back and rewatched it. It is pure high stakes entertainment from start to finish. It is a lovely film. Yes, which I guess is like halfway between modern superhero films and a kind of Indiana Jones style, but with that splash of romance that I think you don't get so much nowadays, with the beautiful and also very funny and very witty Catherine Zeta-Jones as his love interest, who is also the daughter of his mentor, and it works unbelievably well. Hard recommend for The Mask of
Yes.
Zorro.
Well, I think your choice here kind of already is diving into some quite interesting tropes on a very superficial level. I think you've got these kind of reappearing ideas in superhero stories of like the perfect disguise, which is married to the idea of the alter ego, the secret identity. Yeah,
In this case, a small patch of silk over his eyes and a hat.
yeah, and nobody can see through it, which is something that kind of I think the DC movies and the Marvel movies have struggled with. They've kind of shied away from thinking this is no, people are no longer get on board with this. I mean, famously, the ending of that first Iron Man is brilliant, isn't it? Where he's got the press conference and he's got up there to say he's been given the story to say it was his bodyguard, this, that, the other, and then he looks into the camera and he forgets it and he says, "Yeah, I am Iron Man." But that as a kind of as a mission statement really is kind of is interesting. But yes, of course, in the history of superheroes, that perfect disguise is really important. And it kind of is what enables somebody to fight for injustice in a world where kind of the official legal machinery isn't sufficient. And it enables that vigilante idea, enables that person the freedom to act.
What I love so much, and where lots of the heart of the movie comes from, is this is a film that cares so passionately about the injustice. And I
Mm.
feel a little bit like in the modern superhero movie, because the action is so vast and grand and we're always saving the world, the actual people that we're fighting for get a little bit lost. Where the Mask of Zorro, you never forget. Like there are oppressed people working in terrible conditions in a mine. They need to be freed. So it's much more focused and
Yes.
much more humane in kind of going, yes, we have to fight for the wills of the oppressed. And so the kind of the oppressed are in the center of the shot. They're not just kind of extras fleeing from falling buildings. They're like, we see their faces and we see that Zorro cares like personally, intimately about them, which I really love that. And in some ways, it's like the historical distance
Yeah.
makes it easier to think about the oppressed in a more specific way. I
I
think is good.
suppose what that Zorro film does by having kind of the apprentice or the new Zorro, he's one of the people, isn't he? Antonio Banderas' character. So it kind of straddles that idea of the kind of benevolent, secretive aristocrat and the kind of the folk hero, the person of the people, in quite a skillful way, actually.
I really like, in this case, the passing of the mantle thing.
Mm.
Like the idea that it's an identity that can be assumed by multiple people. It's not, one person's not been bitten by a radioactive spider. There is an idea which is Zorro, which kind of makes the whole disguise thing make more sense. It's like, how could a person ever be that character? Because that
Yeah.
character transcends being a person. It's a symbol.
In the interests of momentum, let me introduce my
Yes, come
first
on, Phil.
choice.
Can't wait to hear your first choice. Where are we going?
Okay, so this is probably my most mainstream, recognizably superhero-ish film. I am going to recommend and propose 2012's Dread, based on the Judge Dredd character from the 2000 AD comic series. So British comic, but set in a dystopian America. In the world of Judge Dredd, for those of you who don't know, I think nuclear war has ravaged the globe, and humanity is assembled together in these mega cities. And Mega City 1 in North America is where Judge Dredd operates. Judge Dredd is so kind of crucially and slightly differently, he is part of the official legal apparatus. He's like the ultimate lawman. And I feel like this is another kind of superhero trope. So this tangles perhaps with Batman, who is very much aligned with Commissioner Gordon, so very kind of explicitly on the side of the law. You could make the case that it kind of connects with people like RoboCop as well, other kind of superhero adjacent characters.
Does this mean
But
you haven't picked RoboCop?
it was a toss up between RoboCop and Judge
Okay.
Dredd, yeah, and I
Okay.
went with Judge Dredd.
Intriguing. Okay.
So yes, this is a brilliant film and a very interesting character. So the character comes out of the 80s. Thatcherism, a very kind of satirical take on the lawman, the superhero. It straddles that divide quite interestingly. If he's almost a fascist. Yeah, and he's so kind of rigorous. The idea is that in the future, crime is so bad in these mega cities that the police force are also judge, jury, and executioner. So the police force will apprehend the felon. They will on the spot decide what the penalty is. And then if it's something like execution, they'll do it there and then, or they will kind of arrange for them. They talk about the ISO cubes, which I guess is their version of the prison. It says 3 months in the ISO cubes. But there's a great kind of pulp quality to it. So this film is conditioned very much by the fact that it had a low budget. It was written by Alex Garland, of course, very successful
Oh wow.
novelist who
Yeah.
then has had a burgeoning film career of his own. So although he didn't officially direct this, apparently he did direct the reshoots and he was very much part of the edits. It seems to be inspired by The Raid, the martial arts movie, which is set just in one kind of tower block, basically. And again, it's got that nice feeling that it's not like super high stakes. It's not like a worldwide cataclysmic event. It is a tower block that has been taken over by one gang lord, and Judge Dredd goes in there with his rookie that he's showing that he's got his rookie with him, Judge Anderson, who's got psychic abilities, because in the future some people have psychic abilities. I think he's basically testing her. So, based on her conduct of that day, he's going to graduate her or fail her from the judge corps. It's a wonderful setup and it looks fantastic. The violence is visceral and great. They've got this brilliant built in idea that the drug that is sweeping the megacity, and especially the problem in this tower block, being pushed by the gang lord or gang lady in this case, Mama, is called slow mo. And one of the effects of it is it kind of gives you this euphoric ability to see everything in slow motion. Cue incredible action sequences shot in like 1,000 frames a second, where you see kind of blood in the air, the rainbow light filtering through it. Like it's just a wonderfully fun film that also really honors that character, manages to make him cool without losing his kind of satirical edge. I think Judge Anderson is great in it. Have you seen this film, Matthew?
No, I have seen the is it 1995 Sylvester Stallone
Yes.
movie Judge Dredd, which is not a masterpiece of cinema, and I will not be recommending to our loyal listeners and watchers today.
One thing I find really interesting about that Sylvester Stallone Judge Dredd is it feels very much like they're taking it right. This is a science fiction film. It feels very kind of separate from reality, really. Like the whole world, the sets that they make feels like a bit like Demolition Man. Whereas what Alex Garland does in this film brilliantly, it makes it feels real. It feels viable. It was filmed in Johannesburg, and it just feels grounded and again the characterization is great. Judge Dredd's got some brilliant lines. I like it when his boss is telling him that he's got to take Judge Anderson out to test her, Cadet Anderson, I guess she is at this point. And his boss is telling him, "Yeah, I thought we'd just chuck her in the deep end." Judge Dredd goes, "It's all the deep end."
What's heroic about Judge Dredd? Like, because he doesn't sound.
Yes,
I'm sure he's very useful, but he doesn't sound massively appealing as a character. But maybe I haven't got the flavor of what he is and what's shaping his worldview.
I think it is worth mentioning that in the 80s, especially in British comics, you have this kind of amazing kind of blossoming of very satirical material. And of course, Judge Dredd is part of that. Of course, Alan Moore is part of that. V for Vendetta is a massive part of that. What is heroic about him is that he will not be swayed. He is incorruptible. He's just tenacious, unstoppable. And what makes him a brilliant then partner to Anderson is Anderson as the telepath is empathy. She is kind of much more human, and their dynamic is really crucial to the success. I mean, I haven't read the comic widely. I've just kind of dipped in and out. But certainly in this film, brilliant choice having her there as his kind of pseudo partner because their dynamic works great. And then, of course, he does relent at the end because she should have failed, and because of how like they've saved each other's back or whatever, he gives her a pass. But it's just that little crack
Ooh.
of Judge Dredd actually making a compromise. But yeah, it's a great film. I wholeheartedly recommend it.
I think it's interesting in the routes less traveled. I think there is so much great source material in that more satirical 80s, 90s, slightly more offbeat. I guess what's generally put people off is the economics of it. Like these are not easy stories to take to a mega audience.
Yeah.
But maybe now is a time where people might go and revisit some of that material. But you just got to do it at slightly lower cost. Like you can't make a $300 million, you know, Judge Dredd movie.
The budget of this one was between 30 and 50 million.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it only pulled in 41 million at the time,
Mm.
which is why it's kind of just sputtered along with occasional, cries out for a sequel. It's one of these films that has got a real strong cult following.
Awesome. Great choice, Phil. I'm definitely going to watch that. And it's a film I'd heard of, but had been off put by my various biases, assumptions, and being ruined by Sylvester Stallone. So I'm going to go back and give that a look.
We're two in. Should we take two more before we start trying to order these? I mean, who knows how we're going to order them?
That's going to be mayhem, isn't it?
Yes. What have you got for us next, Matthew?
All right. Okay. So one of the paths less traveled that I wanted to explore is because of that kind of main character 60s energy that we talked about. It feels like in all of those movies, you want to see inside the superhero. So you want to understand their motivations, their struggles, and the best ones of that genre. That's what they do brilliantly. So Spider-Man Brand New Day, for example, I think is a really, really good film. And it's good because it does that. It gets inside Peter Parker's head and all that kind of stuff. But there's obviously another route traveled where you could just go, well, why do you have to be inside? Why can't the whole thing just be a bit more mysterious? Because if superheroes did exist in our world, that's actually how we'd experience them. They'd be these weird figures drifting in and out because we wouldn't all know who they were and what their motivations were. We'd just be going, oh my God, this is weird. So I wanted to find a film that had that kind of sense of weirdness and mystery to it. And I did a bit of digging around. This is not a film that I knew until about 2 weeks ago, but I discovered it. And yeah, I found it wonderful. And the film that I've chosen is called Judex. Have you seen Judex?
So which version?
1963. So there's a TV version, which is much older. But the movie version I'm talking about is 1963.
I think I have seen it.
So it's a French film. It is an adaptation. So the Georges Franju is the director, is an adaptation from a guy called Louis Foyard, who created a series of serials back in, I think it might even be the 1910s. It's like early silent movies, which really are also excellent and generally available on YouTube. In fact, this movie is currently available on YouTube as well. Judex, in a sense, he is an Avenger, but he's an Avenger who's protecting the oppressed. He's a mysterious masked Avenger. There's a horrible, corrupt banker called Favreau, who's basically doing all kinds of sneaky, horrible things, manipulating people. He doesn't care about the poor. He doesn't care about women. He's just trying to do anything corrupt to get what he wants. And Judex is this avenging superhero who's going to come along and unwind the schemes of Favreau. And he has all the superhero machinery that you'd expect. He has a disguise. It's primarily a mask, but he is also a master of disguise. He also has lots of the kind of Batman-y things. In reality, he has like surveillance. He has a lair. He has criminal conspiracies. But we don't spend very much time with all of that stuff, really, because what this movie more wants to do is create a sense of kind of magic and mystery around Judex. It is helped by the fact that in the movie, he is actually played by a magician, which is better than it sounds. So he's played by Channing Pollock, who's a famous American stage musician who does some magic during the course of the movie, once or twice in a slightly silly, quite amusing way.
Is he in a dove costume?
Yeah, we're gonna have a look at that in a minute.
Okay,
that is, I mean, it is just giving people the best moment in the movie, but there's no way of avoiding it. It's absolutely superb. But yeah, what I love about this movie is Judex is not really in the center of the frame at any point. So the characters that drive it really are Favreau. I think maybe it's his niece who's his ward. So she's the kind of innocent protagonist. He's the grisly villain. There's also another just weird kind of third party who is the kind of governess in their house, who is also trying to entrap Favreau, the banker, who also then takes on a kind of Catwoman type vibe. Actually, weirdly ends up having like much more screen time than anyone else. I mean, she's really cool.
Is she the
But
one who dresses up as a nun at one
she
point?
does dress up as a nun,
Yes,
yes,
I
but
remember
eventually
her.
she
Yeah.
gets into her happy space in a kind of long black leotard
Hmm.
with a mask. Basically, yeah, looks like Catwoman. But yeah, Judex is for a start, you don't see him for a really, really long time. You get a series of letters from him. You get people talking about him in that kind of Shakespearean way, like, "Oh, Judex, who is Judex? No one knows who Judex is." We don't see Judex for ages, and in fact, when you do see Judex for the first time, you don't know that you're looking at Judex. You can guess that you're looking at Judex, but he's in disguise. You see very little of him. You don't see him talk very much. So it's all mysterious. It's all he's the force that's come from outside and just comes in and plays a role in the story, which I think is just a really interesting way of doing heroic framing. So yeah, that's
Absolutely.
Judex.
Great choice, Matthew. Yeah, I am very fond of this film. It was beautifully shot, isn't it? This film, really nicely
It
photographed.
is absolutely sumptuous. Not every element of it is watertight. The plotting is a little bit all over the place. There's a kind of weird is someone dead or are they not dead situation, which I don't think is handled with great skill. But it's like that's all that feels so of lower priority in the film. It's like creating this wonderful air of mystery around this character as the opposite to the kind of grubbiness of this villain. So it feels like it is really an artist's film, a photographer's film, beautiful use of music, beautiful use of costume, beautiful use of cinematography attached to a slightly kind of low rent pulp
But that's
story that
part of
doesn't quite
the
make
yeah,
sense.
but that's
Yeah.
part of the pulpiness. That's part
Yeah.
of kind of that origin that I feel is really important. It's not high art. It's populist and it's a bit silly and it's also provocative and challenging. Yeah, I love that kind of slightly cheesy side to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can tell that the maker of this film also loves or has fallen in love with his experience of that original material. And
Yeah.
so this is like an echo of his memory of how wonderful he found that character, which he has expressed in his, which I think also you get in this whole superhero phenomenon, don't you? This is people remembering the stories that they heard when they were young that made
Yeah.
them feel bigger than they were and turning them into something. So, Pimpernel turns into Zorro, Zorro turns into
Yeah.
Batman, Batman turns into Spider-Man. It's kind of a,
And
it's a,
Kevin
yeah,
Feige, Kevin Feige,
yeah.
huge comic book geek. And, he said his motivation was to try and put those stories that he loved as a kid and cherished on the screen.
Can I show the clip? Yeah, so what an extraordinary way to introduce, your superhero.
Fantastic, isn't it?
Like the uncanniness of the waltzing with all the birds' heads, like that very gothic look. Zero explanation. No one ever tells you that this is Judex. You just assume, well, this must be Judex because the
Yeah.
music's telling me it's Judex. He's in the center of the screen,
Yeah. And the
picking up the
Masquerade.
dead bird. No explanation. Just yeah.
Yeah. The Masquerade Ball's a great motif for it as well, isn't it? It reminds me of in Batman Returns when Selena Kyle and Bruce Wayne meet at the masked ball, where of course in that case, ironically, they've both forgotten their disguises.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, symbolically works great. Well, it tallies and ties into my next choice quite nicely. Louis Foyard, who you mentioned there, the creator of Judex, he created, I think, also Fantomas and Les Vampires, which I mentioned briefly. And yes, that iconography, like the cat-suited femme fatale-esque super spy, jewel thief, is also very much part of that. And in Les Vampires, Irma Vep is the name of the character who is masked. They're very much a villain. And I wanted to capture that. I wanted to tie into that. And I've called this archetype the secret operator, that kind of that side of superheroes that are just up to their eyeballs in yes, strange disguises and devices and yes, incredibly complicated plans for things. And rather than Les Vampires, I've gone for Filibus, which is a Italian silent film and from 1915, and it has a lot of the same kind of motifs, but it has a female lead, and Filibus, she is also an aristocrat. I think she's a baroness, her character, but instead of a hero, she is a thief, and she uses like incredible disguises and technological gadgets to commit crimes. She's basically got an airship run by her cronies that will just like pick her up wherever she needs at any point, and then also like drop her into wherever she needs to be dropped into. She's like basically the story of this film is that she hears that about this new jewels that have been brought in. At the same time, the police commissioner, whatever he is, chief inspector, has made it very public that he is going to unmask the notorious criminal Filibus. So she decides basically to steal the jewels whilst framing the inspector as Filibus. And it's this then kind of really compelling battle of wits between the chief inspector and her. Whereas he keeps on saying things like, well, we'll just have to dust this for fingerprints and then it'll become obvious whose it is. He says, it seems to be my fingerprint.
I love it.
But it's such a charming film. It's got like a real lovely energy to it. It's got great pace to it. As I said, this character, she has various different disguises, including dressing up as a man. As a man, she seduces the chief inspector's sister as part of the whole kind of charade. So it's kind of gender bending in a really kind of, ahead of its time way. Ties into this idea of the aristocrat, the bored aristocrat. I guess it makes sense, doesn't it? That the superhero and supervillain in this case needs great wealth, needs great resources. And she also ties into this kind of the gentleman thief idea that I think is a kind of a precursor to the superhero. The gentleman thief who relies on
Yes.
disguise and cleverness with that kind of ambiguous moral code.
People have talked a bit about how like the superhero genre generally is maybe in a sense a little bit conservative, but it's amazing in how many of these stories aristocrats are the heroes. In how many of these stories, this is a counterexample, which I want to ask you about in a second, but how many of these stories we've described so far, they're aligned with the law and the rule of law and the institutions. It's
Definitely.
a surprising feature, isn't it? When you think, the roots of this might be a bit more kind of Robin Hoody.
Well, of course, in lots of versions, the Robin Hood story, he was Robin of
Robin
Locksley.
of
He
Locksley,
is
yeah.
kind of a displaced aristocrat.
But I assumed in
Um,
the old days that's just because that's who wrote the stories. Whereas
yes.
in the 20th century, I don't think you quite have that excuse for kind of admiration of the oligarchy.
Yeah. No, I think this is a really interesting thing to get into. And then when you kind of bring it up to like Tony Stark, Iron Man, you've got kind of like the capitalist equivalent of the aristocrat, the incredibly successful businessman and entrepreneur filling that role.
Because the closest real world parallel for Iron Man is, it's got to be Elon Musk, hasn't it?
Yes.
That not that I think Elon Musk has any iota of the charm and skill, but yeah, it just seems weirdly out of date, that idea, doesn't it? And going, don't worry, the tech oligarchs are coming to save us.
Yeah.
It's such a
Yes,
bizarre
yes,
thought.
yes. And it is kind of does feel like socially pacifying in that way. Yeah. The looking to the aristocrats, the benevolent aristocrats, but they're always like, well, not always, but often they'll have a public persona which is either quite foppish or yes, just a little bit ridiculous, decadent.
These rich, powerful people, they may look like idiots on the surface,
Hmm.
but behind the scenes, they're working for the greater good and they're incredibly smart and they're saving the world. I think
Yeah.
probably the other way around is much, much more likely as a psychological hypothesis. So, Phil, a question on this film. At the moment, this doesn't sound like a superhero. What makes this person a superhero?
So I think this doesn't satisfy my protector of the innocent, certainly. So this is I've cheated, but there's so much of the machinery
I
of
see.
the superhero, and it's I wanted something from that really early period of cinema. So this is, yeah, 1915, as I said. So you've got the incredible gadgets, you've got the incredible disguises, you've got the secretive modus operandi, you've got the aristocratic lineage, and you are on this character's side. Like the way that it is filmed, it's told from her perspective. The chief inspector is a bit of an idiot, and you kind of want her to get away with it. I think for those reasons, I've chosen this film, and also because I, again, like you, I didn't really know this film existed until I did
Yeah.
start to prep for this episode. I thought this is a really kind of cool, fun, yeah, lovely film.
I think it's like its own little subgenre, isn't it? The
Hmm.
I guess yes, the thieving mastermind that you want to succeed. That's definitely
Yes.
a kind of whole counter cultural kind of superhero. I saw in the trailers the other day that they have yet again remade the Thomas Crown affair. The
Oh
Thomas
yeah.
Crown is kind of a similar. He's like a James Bond style thief, isn't he?
Well,
Who's kind of
yes,
yeah,
especially when he's played by Pierce Brosnan. But
yes, yes.
yeah, and also, have you seen or read any of the Arsène Lupin?
I've seen some of the more recent TV program,
The
which
TV
yeah,
show I thought was
yeah, which
really
I thought
good,
was
the
really
new
good.
one, Omar Sy, which again is a bit of an interesting, a bit like the old Mask of Zorro. He's in a world where Lupin exists, but he's also Lupin. He's kind of appropriated that character, so it's both an homage and an adaptation at the same time. But yeah, that is very cool.
Great, love it. Thanks, Phil. Good to get silent movies in the bag as well.
So one thing which I think Philibus didn't quite satisfy me with, which is what why I really wanted Les Vampires, is because I think also a big part of that and the jewel thief idea is the rooftop scenes. And I think that iconography is really crucial to certainly like Batman, but loads of the superheroes hanging out on rooftops. You know, it's that kind of area, isn't it, where you're safe from the from prying eyes. You can do things secretly. You can't be easily apprehended, and visually, obviously, looks fantastic when you're sat next to a gargoyle.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's also a reflection of another thing, which is the superhero as we've got used to it is a very, very urban phenomenon.
Mm.
And it's kind of a part of this anxiety, I guess, of what it feels like, unprecedented in human history before the last couple of centuries of living in such unbelievably close proximity with so many people, many
Yeah.
of whom could have malign desires. There could be hideous things happening right next to you and you wouldn't know it. You're in theory in a place where everything is visible and you can oversee everything, but you always get the sense there might be someone overseeing you. I
Mm.
actually got an example. My next example is actually going to be an anti-urban superhero idea, but
Okay.
I think it is an
Interesting.
urban phenomenon, as you say, rooftops,
Yeah.
sewers,
Yes.
always skyscrapers. Is this
Mm.
kind of the Gotham? I guess is the perfect expression of that, isn't it? Which is like
Yes.
the overwhelmingness of the human city in the modern world and all of the potential for evil and good that it contains. Yeah,
Yes, well, you've just kind of preempted slightly what I was going to kind of reveal later as one of my theses, is that yes, it's the
yeah,
kind of the urbanization of the folk hero is
yeah,
kind of a big part of what the superhero is.
yeah.
Okay, great. So we've got four films then on
Yes.
the board. Shall we attempt? to order them into some sort of top 10
Yes.
unsung superheroes list. I
So
mean,
a
I'm
quick reminder: we
happy.
have the Mask of Zorro, we have Dread,
Yes,
not Judge Dredd, but Dread.
indeed.
We have Judex, and we have I've just forgotten
Philibus.
Philibus.
Yes.
Got the name.
I mean, I'm happy seeing as Philibus is not actually a hero,
Yes.
that I'm happy for Philibus to be at the bottom of that list. And I think Dread is also slightly subversive, satirical, perhaps. I feel like the Mask of Zorro is perhaps our front runner so far.
I feel like that's the front runner. I suspect that maybe on balance, Dread might be a better film than Judex,
Yeah.
although Judex has those wonderful moments in it. And maybe, yeah, Dread maybe points for originality, like different lens.
Mm.
In a
Okay.
sense, yeah, Judex is right in the pocket of the classic. I mean, it's almost the same character as Zorro, but can do magic instead of swords.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well.
Maybe let's go Mask of Zorro, Dread, Judex, and Philibus.
Okay. Make works for me so far.
That was very efficient as well. I think that's the most efficiently we've ever ranked anything. We may be
Excellent.
getting better at this.
Brilliant. Well, time for another film, Matthew. In fact, the last choice in our first half of this list. So, what are you going to present to us next?
I'm going back to assumptions you make about superheroes and what if you make a different assumption. And the assumption I think you make in most of the modern superhero movies is that you're in the city. Generally, as well, like really big cities. It's not just like it happened in a city somewhere. It's always the assumption it's going to be Gotham, Metropolis, New
Well, yeah,
York, like
Mega
mega
City One.
city.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be like we're in the center of the world and everything's really extreme. There's crowds to protect, and we're on rooftops, and there's corrupt institutions and all that kind of stuff. So, what I was thinking about is, well, what happens if you flip that the other way around? And I think what's really interesting is if you flip that the other round, you get to another genre, really, which is obviously one of my genres of obsession that I come back to repeatedly, which is the equivalent of that for the countryside, certainly for the American countryside, but I think it translates in different places, really is the Western. The Western is the hero genre of the frontier.
Yeah.
Or we describe it as the Western for America, but I guess also you'd have the samurai movie if you're in Japan. Like those are different genres. They're the heroes of the countryside. And I guess what makes them not superheroes, so they do fight for the oppressed. They often do have a persona, a cool name that isn't a real name, some kind of like gadget or, special gun or special costume or, catchphrases, all that kind of stuff. But what makes them, I guess, not superheroes is you don't have that kind of slightly transcendent feeling that you think comes with the superhero, like the sense of the eeriness or the macabre or the super skill. So I dug through my memory banks of westerns and in particular Clint Eastwood and remembered Pale Rider. Pale
Okay.
Rider, 1985. Have you seen Pale Rider, Phil?
I have, yes.
Yeah. So a quick reminder / introduction to Pale Rider if you haven't seen it. So it's a Clint Eastwood film. So if you've ever seen any Clint Eastwood films, you can already start to insert quite a lot of the details around Pale Rider, which is it is Clint Eastwood in the frontier. So it is a laconic, underspoken, hard as nails, gunslinging character. But in Pale Rider specifically, he is a mysterious character who arrives in a small town to protect independent gold prospectors. So it's like Mask of Zorro in that respect, from a wealthy mining baron who is oppressing them. Now, he doesn't have a superpower other than obviously being really good at hiding in things, jumping out and surprising people, shooting guns very quickly and accurately, and all the things you'd expect Clint Eastwood to be able to do. But he is quite an uncanny, like superhuman presence. So the
Mm.
film is called Pale Rider, which obviously is a reference to Revelations and the idea of death riding a pale horse. So Clint Eastwood rides a pale horse in this story. And the really interesting thing about this is he has that element of the uncanny throughout. So his character name is introduced as Preacher. So it's kind of like a character name rather than a person's name. It does sound a little bit like a superhero. preacher. He arrives kind of in answer to a prayer. So, you have someone praying and wishing that someone would appear, and then he appears on the horizon on his pale horse, which is like, that's a very kind of superhero type trope for me. And then the really interesting thing about Preacher is, like, a bit like Judex, you don't get it all explained. You just gradually kind of get a sense of who he is, where he's come from. But the most interesting thing is you're never quite sure if he is actually alive or not.
Sounds like a man I once knew. Couldn't be. The man I'm thinking about is dead.
Which it doesn't do in like the modern way of, oh, he's a ghost, he can go through walls. It's just, you get a strange sense there's something uncanny and remorseless about him. And quite early on when you meet him, you see him take a bath and he's got 6 massive bullet holes in his back in a way that makes you think, hang on, is he actually a guy? Is he alive? And you don't get any resolution of that in the film. It's not The Sixth Sense. You don't go, and all the time he was a ghost. It's not that kind of. Not that, sorry if anyone hasn't seen The Sixth Sense.
Spoilers.
Someone in it is a ghost. I'm not going to tell you who. But yes, so he is almost like a supernatural, avenging superhero, but not for himself, for other people. So he fits your criteria. And yes, he just has that slightly supernatural edge, that slightly disassociated feeling that gives him the edge over all of the dudes. And it's justice arriving in a slightly superhuman form, which I think is definitely one of the superhero tropes. But it's just interesting to see it in that totally non-urban environment. So this is a small town. They built a beautiful set for this film underneath the shadow of spectacular mountains, clearly far out of the reach of traditional systems of justice.
Yes.
So it kind of it fits every element of the superhero trope, apart from it feels so unlike a superhero movie because it's out in the middle of nowhere. Which superhero movies? I can't think of any like traditional superhero movies that are set in the middle of nowhere. So there you go. My next choice was Pale Rider.
I guess that biblical illusion, that kind of suggestion that he might be death itself or an agent of death, comes from, like, Book of Revelation is obviously the story of the apocalypse, right? The end of days. That sense that that chaos and moral decline, and therefore, yes, perhaps in need of a superhero and in need of a superhuman agent to
absolutely. And that is what's intrinsic to all those superhero movies, isn't it? That like we live in times which have got so bad, either fascism or crime on the streets or chaos or social breakdown, that something needs to arrive to put everything back in its place. I guess in a sense, like lots of Westerns are like that. And in particular, like lots of Clint Eastwood Westerns are like that, where he plays characters that are not, in a sense, they're not fully formed people. Like they are forces of nature or forces of God, sometimes quite grim creatures. But, the Man with No Name, in a sense, is a bit of a superhero type character.
Yes.
But for me, Pale Rider most neatly fits the criteria because it has this kind of ghostly uncanniness.
Do you know what the origins of it was? Was it an original screenplay? Because I guess it kind of feels very much like a Clint Eastwood movie, like part of the slight conveyor belt-esque feeling of, Clint rehash the same character but in a slightly different way, or with a new element.
Well, the interesting thing is, I think when you look back at the filmography, from now and lay it all end to end, it might feel like that. I think it's interesting because where it comes in is in the mid 80s.
Yeah.
And actually there's almost no Westerns before or after it. Like until you get that kind of proper regenesis of the Western, like the properly revisionist Western with, I guess, Unforgiven and that kind of whole wave of movies. Between the 70s and the 90s, there's actually very, very little. And some of that action, I guess, is a bit like the action in other Clint Eastwood movies, but the framing and the characterization is quite different. I think where this movie suffers a little bit is that the villains are not quite entrancingly villainous enough.
Right.
So what it does brilliantly, I think his character is brilliant and brilliantly introduced. The setting is brilliant and brilliantly introduced. The actual kind of plot and characterization is not quite high stakes enough.
The Revenant as superhero is an interesting little subgenre. It makes me think of The Crow and Spawn. Spawn had a terrible film, but the comic book is very successful, and there's a I think the animated adaptation of that is well loved by fans.
That
The
means you
Crow was
haven't
what I
picked The
thought about.
Crow. I was certain you were going to pick The Crow.
Why I discounted it was because I felt like it was too much of
Yeah.
a revenge story.
Yeah.
Like I don't feel, he is very much, and I guess there's a slight idea, but there's so much of the iconography of the superhero is there. But the comic book of the Crow, the very first Crow comic book, is absolutely heart-wrenchingly brilliant and a million times better than the film. Any comic book fans who haven't read The Crow, I very much recommend it because it was all inspired by him losing his girlfriend, and you can like the pain that is present in that is so you can't help but be affected by it, and the artwork as well is really something else.
Maybe Pale Rider is too much of an Avenger story. Maybe I've misplaced it. I mean, he is definitely fighting on behalf of the poor, the children, the people who can't defend themselves. So
Oh
it's
yeah,
yeah.
definitely. No, I think it works in that community. Okay, interesting. All right, five on the board, and this is kind of our halfway point. Please, yes, we're gonna leave it there and come back to resume the list. So any thoughts or comments you have, please leave us a comment. Please, if you're not already subscribed, subscribe. Leave us a like if you want to give us any encouragement. Any final words from you, Matthew, on this first half?
I was living up to all of my expectations, Phil. I think this is such an interesting territory to explore. So many routes less traveled, so many interesting archetypes. Yeah, I love it. It's very difficult to set the boundaries, but exploring where those boundaries are and where they aren't, I think is really interesting. Just opens up all kinds of interesting films that are just in the shadow of something that's so omnipresent, but just behind it are all these interesting different routes that are really satisfying. So yeah, looking forward to the rest. Also, very much looking forward to the ones that didn't make it, which I've
Yeah.
got some mad stuff in that category. I'm really looking forward to it. So we're looking forward to do that next time.
Well, thank you very much for listening. Can't wait to see you next time on part two of our top 10 unsung superheroes here on the Infinite Screen.